Once there was a man named Rahim who lived in a shining city filled with tall glass buildings, golden lights, and endless noise, and from the outside his life looked perfect because he had a huge house with marble floors, expensive cars parked in a wide garage, branded clothes arranged neatly in a long wardrobe, and a business that earned more money in one day than most people earned in a year. And whenever people saw him they whispered that he was the luckiest man alive. But every night when the lights were off and silence filled his grand bedroom, Rahim stared at the ceiling and felt a strange emptiness growing inside his chest like a silent storm no one else could see, and he could not understand why someone who had everything felt like he had nothing. Rahim had grown up poor in a small village where his father worked in the fields and his mother stitched clothes for neighbors, and as a child he had promised himself that he would escape poverty forever, so he studied hard, worked day and night, ignored festivals, missed family gatherings, and slowly climbed the ladder of success. And when he finally became rich he believed happiness would automatically arrive like a guest invited by money, but happiness never knocked on his door. One evening, after a long business meeting, Rahim felt tired of the noise of the city and decided to drive without direction, and his car eventually reached the old village where he had been born, and as he stepped out he smelled the familiar scent of soil and fresh air, and something inside him softened, and while walking through the narrow path he saw an old man sitting under a tree, smiling peacefully while sharing simple bread with a group of laughing children, and the old man's clothes were plain and worn but his eyes were shining with a joy Rahim had not felt in years. Rahim felt curious and sat beside the old man and asked him how he could look so happy without owning anything valuable, and the old man gently laughed and said that he owned more than enough because he had strong relationships, good health, meaningful work, and a grateful heart. And Rahim frowned because those things sounded too simple compared to his empire of wealth. But the old man continued speaking and said that money can build a house but it cannot create warmth, it can buy medicine but not true health, it can attract people but not real friendship, and it can fill a room with luxury but not a soul with purpose. Rahim felt uncomfortable because the words were quietly true, and the old man invited him to stay for dinner with the villagers, and although the meal was only lentils and bread cooked on a small fire, everyone laughed, shared stories, helped one another, and expressed thanks for the little they had, and Rahim noticed something powerful in that simple gathering because no one was pretending, no one was competing, and no one was trying to prove their worth through possessions. Later that night Rahim walked alone under the stars and realized that he had spent his whole life collecting things while ignoring experiences, chasing status while neglecting relationships, and building a business while slowly destroying his peace. And he understood that his emptiness was not caused by a lack of money but by a lack of meaning, and for the first time he admitted to himself that he was rich in possessions but poor in connection. The next morning Rahim visited his childhood home, now small and fragile, and he remembered how his parents had once smiled even during hard days, and he remembered sitting with them on the floor sharing simple meals filled with laughter, and tears formed in his eyes as he realized that happiness had once lived with him when he had very little, and he wondered at what point he had traded joy for ambition. When Rahim returned to the city he did not sell everything or abandon his success, because wealth itself was not evil, but he changed how he lived, and he began spending time with his employees instead of only commanding them. He supported education projects in poor areas without seeking publicity, he visited his village regularly and built a small school there. And most importantly he started protecting his time for family, friendship, rest, and reflection. Slowly the emptiness inside him began to shrink, not because his bank account grew larger but because his heart grew fuller, and he discovered that true richness comes from gratitude, service, love, and purpose, and he learned that having everything outside means nothing if you have nothing inside, and as years passed people still admired his success. But this time when Rahim lay down at night he no longer stared at the ceiling with a hollow feeling, because he had finally understood that inner richness is built not by what you own but by who you become and how deeply you connect with others, and he often shared his story with young dreamers, telling them to chase excellence but never at the cost of their soul, to earn money but not lose meaning, and to remember that the greatest treasure in life is not something you can hold in your hands but something you feel in your heart. And that is how Rahim learned that having everything can leave you empty, but discovering inner richness can make even a simple life feel complete.